can you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about your firm, June 15, what's exactly happening, and broadly, what do you do?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
June 15 is, we are an offshoring consulting firm. We work with CPA firms to help them hire their own employees
Yep.
as opposed to working with agencies. And we
Yep.
can do that in India, Philippines, Argentina, and hopefully Mexico soon. So we provide them with three things: advisory that they need to successfully hire, manage, and grow their employees, local compliance support, regardless of the country they choose, and then on the ground operation support. So, with these three things, even a solo practitioner can have their own people in, uh, in, in any country they want.
Okay, cool. So, what do you want to tell us a little bit, Anshul, about June 15 and how has it been over the last 1 years? When we last connected, you were working on a few projects and getting on a few Indian firms, a few CPA firms to India, right? So, what do you want to tell us? How was the last 1 year, and what have you exactly seen in terms of interest, from the CPA firms wanting to look at India?
So last year was very interesting because this is a new concept, right? There's a myth out there in the market that only bigger firms can go direct and the smaller firms need to go through an agency. So there's a lot
Yep.
of education that I had to do. So that's why all the videos that you see on LinkedIn, just
Yep.
clearing out myths that, okay, even a solo practitioner can have their own employees in countries. So that was a big part of what we did last year. And that started to pay off towards the end of last year, where I started getting a lot more inquiries. And the interesting thing was most of those inquiries were from two groups. One were smaller CPA firms, so less than 10 employees. So that was really interesting, where they came to me and they were like, oh, we just need two people. We just need, like, one person. So that was very interesting. And the other was people looking to buy CPA firms. So that actually has become the biggest group of leads for me, where a lot of, I wouldn't say private equity firms per se, but like family offices, individual buyers, angel investors, they are coming to me and they're like, well, we are looking to buy two or three accounting firms. And one of the first things we want to do is hire global talent. And they're reaching out to me for advice to help them with execution. So I have about 10 firms that I'm talking to across, and we're just waiting for the busy season to end. So hopefully we'll be able to execute on all of those firms. So that is what has happened in the last year. A lot of education, which has led to a lot of traction, and traction from interesting groups like smaller CPA firms and buyers of CPA firms.
Interesting. Okay, so let me understand. Okay, so you say there are two kind of spikes you're seeing, right? With
Yeah.
smaller firms looking at India, correct? Looking at setting.
So yeah, India, Argentina, um,
Okay.
but yeah, India is like the biggest share.
Yeah. Okay, so they're looking at talent outside the US. That's one. So even if it's a small firm, it doesn't matter. And a lot of family offices, private equity angel investors in the US are looking at acquiring CPA firms.
Yep. So they're looking at rolling up at least two or three firms. So one conversation I had last week, he was a very young guy. Right? He was early 20s. Like he started his firm, he's already bought another firm, and he's looking to buy four firms for every year for the next few years. Just think about the scale of that. So that's what's happening. A lot of non CPAs or people who don't have CPAs are looking to buy CPA firms. And I think that's going to be the biggest trend for the next 2, 3 years.
So how do you buy a CPA firm? I mean, what's the process? You have to be an American to buy a CPA firm. You
No,
what is it like? And you have to be a CPA, or how do you go about with it?
so I am not a broker, but I'll
Yeah.
share my understanding of it. You don't have to be an American. Like we talked about it a bit before. I
Yeah.
do see like interest from Indian CA firms who are looking to buy CPA firms. Now there are regulatory requirements in the US. If you are buying a CPA firm, I think the majority ownership has to be with licensed CPAs. But I mean, you can get a CPA while you are in India. So there are some regulatory requirements, but I mean, the process otherwise is the same, right? You get your funding, you find a firm that you like, you make an offer, and then you buy it. Like there's a lot of nuances to it, right? You need to figure out what kind of firm you want to buy, like what value you're going to add, what investment model you're going to use. But that applies to every firm. So the process is very straightforward. Um, and I'm seeing a lot of non-US firms now coming in and buying firms.
And how do they discover these CPA firms? How do you find them? That's one. Secondly, what's the average team size? That is ideal to acquire, and what would it cost approximately? If you could give us an overview.
So where do you find these firms? There's quite a few services. I recently had this gentleman, Chris Tab, on my podcast, and one of the services he has started is Canary.accountants, I believe. So there's a lot of platforms like that where you can go, you can put in your requirements, and they will give you firms that are for sale or like getting ready to exit that you could look at. Then there are obviously brokers that you can go to. So you can go to brokers, they have a list. A lot of people who fund these acquisitions, right? So these are your SBA loan providers, other angel investors. They usually have a list of firms that are looking to sell. So while there's a lot of CPAs retiring, the number of firms that are actually ripe for selling is actually not as high. So the competition in terms of buyers is really high. But that's how you go about buying a firm. Like you need to ask your network, lawyers, other accountants, brokers, and look at these databases like Canary, where you can find firms. So that's where you find firms. And to answer your second question, if there's an ideal size, I don't think there's an ideal size of a firm. Private equity, they're going at the bigger end of the market, like 5 million plus. Then there's people that are coming in into the sub 5 million, so 1 to 5 million. I personally believe that the biggest opportunity is around 1 million and under, because these firms, no one's going after them. Like no one is, because they're so small. They could be just like 4 or 5 people, right? And they're run by an owner. Owner is ready to retire, and they're just looking to hand off their clients to somebody who's going to take care of their clients. Um,
Yep.
so I don't think there's a lot of people going after the smaller segment yet, but I think that's about to change. So th- there is no perfect size, but like if you are looking for a recommendation, I would strongly suggest people look at the smaller firms, 1 million or even lower in revenue.
Interesting. So the person you were talking about, who has bought a couple of CPA firms, so he's looked at a similar portfolio, 1 million and below.
I think his thing was 1 to 3 million. But like I am talking to a lot of CPAs, a lot of buyers who are looking at that smaller firm segment right now. And because no one's really going after them, they're basically firm owners in that segment are basically just shutting down their shop and retiring.
Oh
And
my
that
God.
to me is just so much value lost, so much wealth lost as an entrepreneur. You just need to go and show them that you have the capital and that you'll take care of their clients. Um, but again, it's like finding them, convincing them, because there's challenges associated with buying firms.
Yep, yep. And what are the challenges associated with buying firms?
So the biggest thing is, we're going to talk about Indian accounting firms buying US firms, right? So the biggest challenge you'll have is trust. CPA profession everywhere, like even in India or even in the US, it's built on relationships. It runs on trust. So now you got to convince the owner who's retiring that, hey, I don't live here. I live in a country far, far away, but you can still trust me. I can still build the relationship or maintain the relationships that you have built. Because if you look at the typical stereotype or the typical demographic of an accounting firm owner here, they're they're older, uh, most likely male in their 60s, and their clients are not just their clients, they're their friends. These are small town CPAs. They're playing golf with their clients. Their families are most likely friends.
Yep,
So their challenge is if they sell the firm to you, they need to make sure that you'll take care of their client who's also their friend. Because
yep,
if you don't, they're going to tell that CPA when they're playing golf that who did you stick me with? Like this person, like. they don't know what they're doing, and they don't want that in their retirement, uh,
Yeah.
right? So that's the biggest challenge. Like, how do you maintain the trust? How do you build that trust? How do you maintain those relationships? The other is there's a lot of buyers out there. So why should I, as a CPA firm owner, choose you? Right?
Mm,
And so that is something you need to work on. Like, how do you differentiate yourself? And the answer is like you'll have to convince me that you are the best at maintaining trust in these relationships.
mm,
And then third is the value add, right? Okay, you're buying my firm, but what's the value you're gonna add? Like for most Indian firms, the obvious answer is like global talent, right? We
mm,
know you have a lot of business, you're struggling to find people,
mm,
and we can help you with the talent right away. But it needs to
mm,
go beyond that. Are you incorporating AI? Are you
mm.
helping them launch new services? So these are some challenges that you'll need to think of if you're buying a US CPA firm. You need to stick to the laws and regulations, but I don't think that's the biggest hurdle. It's these other things.
Okay. And when you're talking about acquisition, Anshul, what are the multiples like? So if someone has a revenue of say 1 million, so what are the multiples they typically look at, or what's the market in terms of that? Does it differentiate
um,
state-wise?
so it really depends. Like, so I don't think I'm the right person to share
Okay.
exact multiples. Like I've
Yeah.
heard ranges from 1.2 to 1.5, but you have to do your research. In the
Yeah.
I'm not in the know of multiples, but I
Yeah.
could tell you factors that impact multiples that I've heard.
Yeah.
A firm that is hybrid um, is gonna command a higher multiple. A firm that's fully remote will command an
Mm,
even higher multiple.
mm,
A firm that's not owner dependent or not as owner dependent would be higher
mm,
multiple because then it's a signal to the buyer that even when I
mm,
buy the firm, I can still run that firm pretty
mm,
seamlessly.
mm,
So, like their use of technology, a lot of CPA firms are still not using cloud-based services. That to me is just mind-boggling.
mm,
It's the use of technology. It's are they remote? It's what services do they offer? Like what their pricing is like, because CPAs are under a lot of pressure to increase their prices, to increase their margins. So
mm.
depending on what progress that local firm has made, it's going to impact those multiples.
Anything else on this? Like, how do you get a lot of requests from Indian firms looking at US CPA firms? There, because I've been getting a lot of requests. I had a chat with you, right? A lot of people in our community are looking at US CPA firms, and I was kind of okay. I said the only person I can ask is Anshul. So I said, hey, let's
So
hop on the call.
I
But yeah.
have been seeing an uptick. Uh,
Hmm,
I have been seeing an uptick where people are inquiring that, hey, uh, is this something you can help with, or where can we find more information about this? Um, I haven't actively followed any of those
hmm,
leads per se
hmm,
because I mean that's not what I do. But
yeah.
I think more and more firms are looking at it, and I love it. I love the fact that the CP industry is going global. I know a
Hmm,
lot of people in the US have a problem with it, but
hmm,
I personally, the entrepreneur in me, loves it. And
hmm,
I feel like if you are an Indian CA firm or an Indian business house and
hmm,
you are interested, do look at this option. Like there is a wealth transfer of a generation that's happening right now.
hmm,
75% CPAs are retiring. That wealth needs to go somewhere.
hmm,
And as with offshoring and with the technology, it has become very easy to run a global firm. So I
hmm.
highly encourage your viewers to look at this.
So, what is the ideal approach?
First thing you need to do is to do some soul searching yourself,
Yeah.
right? Because the actual transaction, that's not going to be the challenging part, right?
Hmm,
First thing is like, why do you want to buy a firm? Like, and think in terms of we talked about value add, right? What value will you bring to that firm? Why should an owner sell to you, right? For
hmm,
Indian firms, the clear answer is talent. That yes, we
hmm,
can help you find good talent, cost-effective talent. But
hmm,
think beyond that. Right? Are there AI tools? Are there automation tools that you can use? How
hmm,
will your acquiring that firm make that firm better? How would it make that firm's clients' lives easier? So
hmm,
that's the first thing you need to think of. And once you do that, right, then you not need to start thinking about what kind of firm do I need to buy? Do I need to buy a firm from an owner who's retiring? Do I
Mm,
need to partner with somebody who's young and who's just started and needs the capital and maybe the guidance to grow?
mm,
Or do I need to follow a regular private equity playbook where we're buying firms that are inefficient, rolling them
mm,
up into a big firm? Then you need to think about the exit. Like, what's your plan? Like, are you planning to sell this to a bigger buyer at some point, or is
mm,
this something that you're going to pass on to your future generations?
mm.
I think these are some questions you need to answer, and that will help you figure out where do I start, what kind of firm do I need to buy, and then there's a lot of online resources where there's business selling and practice business practice M&A websites where you can see which businesses are up for sale. You can talk to brokers. You can look at Canary.accountants, I believe that's the website. And that's not the only one. There's a lot of databases out there, some even for free, that allow you to look for firms. But first, you need to do some soul searching to really understand why I want to do this and what value I can provide.
Let's come back to the outsourcing bit, right? So, whenever you're talking about the outsourcing, first of all, I want to ask you: do you see a lot of firms, having this kind of a FOMO that, hey, you know what, I got to go to a country and have a team there? Do you see that FOMO happening?
So clients are happy with India.
Okay.
It's I don't think the purpose of the videos was to say India is not working
Yeah.
out. The
Yep.
purpose of those videos, or what I'm hearing from clients, is that it's
Yeah.
not as easy as they thought.
Yeah.
And I'm not complaining because that's why you and I have a job, right? If it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
easy, we wouldn't be needed.
Yeah.
But so overall, I think when clients come to India, like one of the things that they're seeing is when you go online and search, right, offshoring to India, you
Mm.
see very big promises being made online. You'll save
Yep.
70%, you'll save 80%. And while that's true in some cases, right, it's not always true.
Yeah.
So when people come to India, their first year, they love the cost savings.
Mm.
Then year two rolls in, and then their appraisals start to kick in.
Mm.
So India employees are asking for appraisals up to 30%. Now that to a US person is like very shocking because in the US there's like a 2 or 3% increment every year, if
Yep.
that. So
Yep.
culturally they're just shocked. They're like, "What? You're asking for a 30% raise? I didn't get a 30% raise in the last 5 to 10 years combined."
Yeah.
So that that's just a cultural element a lot of people need to get used to.
Yep.
And I I feel like the American side needs to understand how to do business in India better
Mm.
because that was the purpose of that video, that yes, people are asking for more, but the reason they seem expensive to you is because you're not utilizing them to the fullest, right? That person can do so much more, but if you're just having them do bookkeeping or tax form review, you're not utilizing them, and that's why they're becoming expensive to you. So the suggestion is like promote them, right? Give them more responsibility. And if you feel that that person is not promotion worthy or they're not performing well, then let them go. Like I know it sounds harsh, but for an employee, from an employee's perspective as well, if a company is not investing in you, if they're not looking at your full potential, you don't want to stay with them anyway. So, yes, clients are happy. They just need a little bit of education around how to get things done in India, how to unlock the full potential of their India office. So that's why when I talk to people and they're like, "Oh, offshoring is getting expensive. India employees are getting expensive," I throw it back to them, and I tell them that, well, it's most likely because you're messing it up, not because the India office is getting expensive. And even in India, right, the cost of doing business in Bangalore and Mumbai versus Ahmedabad or Jaipur or like Coimbatore, it's really different.
Yep.
So when people say India is getting expensive, I'm like, all right, maybe the city you are in is getting expensive, and that's true.
Yep.
But so that's how I would address that.
Yeah, it is getting expensive for sure. Like whenever I get a lot of CVs, we did a lot. We did a GCC series. I think you know about it, right?
Yeah.
I did mention this to you. So I got an influx of CVs, and everybody wanted like a 60% hike, a 50% hike. you know,
Yeah,
because it's the in thing right now, and talent is such a big deal with the private equity coming in. A lot of hiring is happening in India, be it Citrin or Amanino, and
yeah.
all of them. There's a lot of hiring.
Private equity, like I tell people that private equity money is impacting offshore salaries as well. Because these
Yep,
companies that have like taken so much private equity money, they're just flowing money like crazy just to
yep,
show growth.
yep,
And it is impacting salaries for sure.
yep,
But overall, I think India is still extremely cost effective.
yeah,
Depending on your goals, the
yeah,
US firm just need to have the right strategy and go to the right location to
yep.
get that
Yep.
benefit.
Anshul, please tell me which outsourcing market is more accessible, US or Australia, if you have a perspective.
So I do. So I haven't done much work in Australia, but based on what I've read, it seems like the most accessible market is UK,
Hmm.
followed by Australia, and then US and Canada in one. And the only reason I say that is because there's so much competition in the US that if
Hmm.
you don't really have a presence,
Hmm.
I get 10 emails every day from companies who want to start outsourcing.
Hmm.
So it's just the competition is really high.
Hmm.
And I've just felt, based on my interactions with limited interactions with accounting firms in the UK, they just seem more open, especially towards India. Maybe it's because of the relationship that we have. Maybe
Yep.
it's because of the history. Uh, so yeah, I would say Australia seems more accessible to me.
Okay, okay, cool. And you're in Mexico right now, and then you travel quite a bit. So, what is it with Argentina, Mexico? Can you give us a little bit of a perspective? And why do the CPA firm, I'm sure they're all great, but how do they decide? And how do you help them decide? Hmm.
So my thesis is that smaller firms would prefer Latin America more.
Hmm.
Um, so there are things, right? I'm actually in talks with a big private equity firm. They already have an office in India,
Hmm.
and they are going through all the problems that we talked about. People not showing up, it's getting
Hmm.
expensive.
Hmm.
And actually, after this, I have a call with them.
Hmm.
So they were like, we're looking at an alternative, right?
Hmm.
India is great, but that cannot be our only option.
Hmm.
So at that point, I told them, why not look at Argentina? It's in the same time zone. It's in the long term, it's going to be a lot cheaper than India, and it's
Hmm.
a good backup, right? India, if you have 200 people in India, you can maybe have 2025, and people love the fact that it's in the same. People love the fact that it's in the same time zone.
Yeah.
I think about a third of business owners in the US are Hispanic, so they speak Spanish.
Yep.
So Argentina and Mexico, they're Spanish-speaking countries. So that's also a big plus. And going back to the control aspect that
Yep.
accountants like, if
Yep.
somebody is working the same time zone hours without them having to stay up overnight,
Hmm.
that's a lot more attractive. So
Hmm.
when I ask people that, okay, what do you want? Do you want like bookkeepers? Do you want tax people? Do you want audit? If somebody wants all three, the only real option for them is India. But if
Hmm.
somebody only wants bookkeepers, right, they can go to Mexico and Argentina. It's not like they don't have tax people here, but it's the talent is not ready made. In India, you can find anybody and as many of them you want.
Hmm.
So that's why I tell them, okay, if you're only looking at bookkeeping, if you want people to work US hours, and if
Hmm.
there's something about India and Philippines that makes you nervous,
Hmm.
then look at Argentina.
Hmm.
So Argentina is big, and I think I don't think Argentina is going to take much market share from India, but I think it will eat Philippines lunch. It will because over India, I don't think Philippines has much to offer except for the fact that they're better at communication skills. But guess
Yep.
what? Argentinians are better than Philippines when it comes to communication. So I think Argentina is going to come up more and more. Where Mexico came is this private equity firm that I'm talking to. They were more interested in Mexico than Argentina. So I have a friend here. It's March break. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna bring the family here. We'll spend some time, but I'll also do some research on how Mexico could work out. And
Yeah.
Mexico is also a great option because people can actually drive to Mexico.
Yeah.
Their office would not be 20 hours to India or like 18 hours to Argentina. It could be like a 2 hour drive.
Yeah.
So that's very attractive. But then Mexico is the most expensive option.
You also mentioned earlier that even smaller clients are looking at offshoring, not necessarily India, but why? Why offshoring? Why not outsource the work?
So, I mean, that's my crusade, right? There's two ways to hire global talent. You can
Hmm.
work with an outsourcing agency or you can go direct.
Hmm.
I am personally a bigger fan of going direct because it gives you more control.
Yeah.
And when you have more control, you just get better results. You're able to instill your culture. Your offshore employees report to you directly and only to you.
Hmm.
So, as an accountant, right, if you think they want more control because they're control freaks by nature.
Yep.
I should call them freaks, but they're controlling by nature.
Yep.
So they love the fact that they have full control over their offshore employees. And especially for smaller firms, right? They just love the fact that there's no one between them and their offshore employee.
Yep.
So that's why I'm a bigger proponent of going direct. But that's not to say that outsourcing doesn't work. Like there are
Yep.
good agencies. I have a client that I connected with an agency, right?
Yep.
I am so vocal about going direct, but their
Yep.
needs were very clear that at this point, they should not be going direct and they should be working with an agency. So
Yep.
it's not like outsourcing doesn't work. It's just there's
Yep.
so many people doing it and they're setting the wrong expectations. They're maybe not fully trained. Their communication skills aren't the best. So people
Yep.
aren't getting the results they want. So I yeah, I mean outsourcing works absolutely. I am biased towards going direct because that's the work I do. But I
Yeah.
would never say that outsourcing, working with an agency doesn't work. It's just you have to find the right agency, you have to put in the time. And my thing is, if you have to put in the time, why not go direct
Yes.
and solve this for good?
Yeah. And you also become more desirable when you have your own team outside of the US, right? Because for private equity, that's
Oh,
because.
absolutely. 100%. Because the private equity playbook is buy a firm that doesn't outsource, buy a firm that doesn't use
Mm,
AI or automation, and then do both those things.
mm,
It's just offshoring has it's uncomfortable because in the US, what people do is they equate accounting offshoring with manufacturing offshoring. Because
mm.
what happens with manufacturing is if you're building a car in the US, now you've built a factory in China, you just
Yeah.
close down the US factory.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works with accounting, right? You're not closing down your
Yeah.
accounting shop here. You
Yeah.
just don't have enough people. So you're
Yeah.
just shipping away some work.
When you talk about the Trump policies, right? Has the Trump policies of, make America great and create more jobs, will it impact this side of accounting and this
I
service
don't
line?
think so. I don't
Mm,
think so because again, like with the accounting offshoring, like you're not like I'm sure there are companies that are, you know, that are replacing U.S. accountants. I'm sure
mm,
there are companies that are going to do that. But the
mm,
overwhelming majority of accounting firms that I've spoken to, they're not looking to replace U.S. accountants
mm,
because they have jobs that have been open for months. They have positions
mm,
that have been open for months. So they're just trying to fill that.
mm,
And with an offshore employee, you're actually giving a lot of time back to your onshore accountants.
mm,
So I don't think like politics and all of that is going to seep into this.
mm.
I'm sure there are some people who will never offshore because it goes against who they are, it goes
Yep.
against what they believe in, and that'll always be the case. But I don't think offshoring is going anywhere. I think it's here to stay, and people need to accept it, and people need to think about how can I leverage it to grow.